Meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the County of Annapolis on February the 8th, 2022. Welcome, everybody. We'll start off the meeting today with the roll call. District 1.
Bruce Prout.
District 2.
Brian Fuzzy Connell.
District 3 is Alan Parrish, myself. District 4.
White Bardo.
District 5.
Lynn Longmire.
District 6.
Alec Morrison.
District 7.
David Hudson.
District 8.
Michael Gunn.
District 9.
Wendy Sheridan.
District 10.
Brad Redden.
District 11.
Diane LeBlanc.
Thank you very much. Next is disclosure of interest. Are there any issues on the agenda that any of the councillors feel that they need to declare a conflict? Councillor Hudson?
Yes. Item number 6.9.
Yes?
I'm the treasurer of that organization, so I'd like to be excused.
All right, well, you try and remember, and we'll all try and remember when that comes up, be excused, okay? Next is the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
It's moved by the deputy warden, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. Are there any discussions with respect to the agenda?
Yes, please.
Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. Councillor Bartow and I, and maybe some others, attended a meeting on Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities reorganization the other day, and I would just like to say a word about it at the proper time. Thank you.
Yes, I was on that meeting as well. Just trying to think of where it would be appropriate. That in a way, that's almost like a committee report.
Well, what I was thinking was I would just mention it and then submit a report for next week.
And just trying to figure out, are you intending to do that now or later in the agenda?
Later in the agenda, please.
I'm just trying to figure out under new business, I guess, maybe we'll call it 6.10. I was going to briefly address that in my warden's comments as well.
Okay.
But you can do it then. So there's the one change there. Seeing no others, I'll call for a motion. Actually, there is a motion on the floor as it was. So then I'll ask the mover and seconder, can you move it as amended?
Yes.
Yes.
And Councillor LeBlanc. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda as amended, and all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. Now we'll go through a number of Committee of the Whole minutes. We had a number of Committee of the Whole meetings over the past little while dealing with specific issues. So,
hi, David. The CAO just asked me to join.
what? I don't know what that was. So we'll start with 4.1, the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting, January 11th, 2022. Deputy Warden, do you want to?
Oh, yes, I'm right here.
Move that. You'll move the adoption of those minutes.
Yes, I move to adopt the minutes from
Is there
the
a
minutes
second?
from a regular meeting, Committee of the Whole meeting held January 11th, 22 to be approved as circulated.
Seconded by Councillor Prout. I think I saw his hand up.
Yes.
Any discussion with respect to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
4.2, that the minutes of the special meeting of Committee of the Whole held on January 13th, 2022 be approved as circulated.
Is there a second for that? Councillor Longmire, second. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next,
4.3, that the minutes of the special meeting of committee of the whole held on January 25th, 2022 be approved as circulated.
is there a second for that? Councillor Connell seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's carried. Next,
4.4, that the minutes of the special meeting of committee of the whole held on January 26th, 2022 be approved as circulated.
seconded by Councillor Hudson. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. I just want to say something about these minutes now that we've approved them all. I read them very carefully, and I'm sure all the other councillors did as well. And the fact that they're being approved without amendment reflects very well on our clerk, and I want to thank her for the wonderful job that she does on the minutes.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Here, here.
Next, business arising from the minutes. Councillor Connell, I believe this was your motion. Do you want to make that motion?
I'm trying to follow you here. I had the planning department report, but
I've got 5.1, Annapolis Waterkeepers presentation.
That would be page 2. Councillor Connell.
page 2. I'm running 2 computers today, so
It's just after the minutes, Councillor Connell. We're now under the title of business arising from the minutes. And 5.1 is the Annapolis Waterkeepers presentation. And there's a notice of motion that you gave last day that you would be bringing this motion.
yes. That staff be directed to contact the Nova Scotia Department of Environment asking for overview on permits and permitting processes and what regulations we can apply or do in response to the information submitted by the waterkeepers, Annapolis waterkeepers.
Is there a second for that?
Right here.
Councillor Sheridan seconds. Discussion?
Mr. Warden, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Dick, yes.
we've in fact contacted the department already. They will not, I shouldn't say they will not, they will not likely come to a council meeting. That's not something that they typically do. We have been advised that if we wanted any specific information, we can send an official request to them and they would react accordingly.
Thank you for that. I hadn't actually anticipated that they would come to a meeting. I was looking for a substantive response to our inquiries at this point. So it looks like that may be all right if they are agreed to doing that. Councillor Gunn, or sorry, Deputy Warden Gunn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, no, this is the Department of Environment. Why won't they come and answer for their questions? Was there some kind, through you, Warden, to the CAO, was there some kind of reason that they won't come, or they just typically don't do? That's not in their purview to answer to the citizens of a citizens committee, as we are? They don't have to do that?
The response that we received was that they do not come to community meetings.
That
That doesn't say that they won't, but they do not. We could make a request that they would entertain at that time. My suspicion is that they probably would not attend, but if council wanted them, and I think if I recall a conversation with Councillor Connell, he had indicated that he'd like them to come to a meeting. So we asked that specific question, and they said it's not something that they typically do.
Did they give us a way? Do we know of some way to compel them to come?
I don't think we can compel them to come. We can ask them to come. They will determine if they want to show up or not. But we do have. This is, you can't see how thick this is, but this is the documents that they've returned to us based on our request. So I'll go through that information, and if it's deemed necessary to have them come to a meeting, I'll send a formal request, but my suspicion is that they won't come.
Thank you.
If I could just clarify, as I read the motion on the floor, it doesn't request them to come. It requests a response that I would assume would be in writing. And what I anticipated would happen is that, excuse me, we would get a response in writing. And after we looked at that, then if we felt that we wanted to have them come and further explain, we could deal with that after we see what response we get from them.
And can I ask one follow-up question?
I'll just see if there's somebody else here with their hand up. Councillor LeBlanc, is your hand up there?
Yes, and I was looking at the same motion as you were, and it says that we want an overview on permits. So did they provide us an overview on the permits with the document they sent our CAO? And what regulations can apply to these permits?
I have no idea. The information came yesterday. I haven't had a chance to go through it. That's all right. I just haven't had a chance to go through it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, I'll say that I wasn't expecting just to get some documents. I was expecting to get a response. And the response could be, there could be some documents attached to the response. But I'll tell you, that's the way I read the motion. Similar to what I think Councillor LeBlanc was suggesting.
Yes.
That we get a response in writing and not just some documents. So we'll have to play that out. But I think as I read that motion, it's pretty clear that we want a response, not just some documents. Any other comments? Madam Clerk?
You're muted. Oh.
No, it wasn't unmuting for me. My question is, do you want this motion just directing staff from committee of the whole, or did you want council to do the direction? Right now, it's just directing staff without going through council.
I guess since it's committee of the whole,
you can direct staff.
We can direct staff at committee of the whole without going to recommending it to council.
Right. I'm just checking if that's what
that
you're
would be
doing.
fine. I believe that's the intention of the committee is that they want this done right away. And I think I feel a consensus that council is going to be in favor of the motion as presented.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. And these documents that they sent Mr. Dick or the CAO through you, Warden, are they available to the public as well? I mean, can anybody, send and ask for these documents as long as through freedom of information or something?
I can't answer that, but I would suspect that if somebody wanted information, they would be required to provide that information subject to freedom of information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next is 5.2. The heading is former Bridgetown Regional Elementary School. Now this comes on the agenda following a notice of motion that I gave last month. And I've decided not to proceed with the motion today. The intent of the motion was to get more information that I myself would like to see before making a decision about what to do with the Bridgetown Regional Elementary School. However, before I proceed with the motion, and I maybe it'll come up later on, I want to gather the feeling of council on this issue. In other words, I want council to lead. And we haven't had a discussion yet, really, as a council, with respect to what we all would like to see with respect to this Bridgetown Elementary School. So we do have some offers that have come forward. We need to discuss this in open. This is not something we should be discussing in closed, in my view. So what I would propose is that we put on the agenda for the council meeting next week, under new business, discussion of the Bridgetown Elementary School. And we can all have our shot at it. We can see if there's any kind of a consensus around council. We can see if there's more information that councilors want. We can see if any of the offers, the council wants to accept them. We can see where we want to go. And we need to work together as a group of 11 to try and figure out how we're going to go through this, which I think is a very important issue that's going to affect the town of Bridgetown one way or the other for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So would that be, could I get some?
Mr. Warden, if I may?
Could I? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on that. I think if I may be so bold as to say that it may be premature what you're asking. And my suggestion to council is, why don't we have the discussion in closed first? And I think a lot of the answers that you may be looking for might come out of that meeting in close when we discuss if we want to even accept any of the offers. So maybe the decision should be made as a direction in the closed session as opposed to something in open, because we might decide something completely different in closed.
No, my view is it should be done in open.
Well, we can't discuss the offers in open until we've discussed them in closed.
We can discuss anything we want in open.
No, we can't discuss the offers in open. Those are closed. These are offers to buy the facility, and until we have those discussions and make a decision, we can't discuss those in open.
Sure.
They're contract negotiations with the proponents, so we can't have those open discussions.
We're not negotiating contracts yet. We're just deciding what.
No, but what I'm saying is, why don't we wait, have the discussion and close, and then we can make a decision based on those discussion and closed, and make that the direction in open post the discussion and closed.
I agree.
I just want to clarify, under the municipal government, we never have to go in closed. We were allowed to in certain circumstances if we wish.
But we
Okay.
every meeting we go into close to discuss contract negotiations. So these are contract negotiations with proponents based on an RFP we issued to potentially sell the Bridgetown Elementary School. So I don't know why we would do something different than what we've always done. We should be discussing the options in closed, and council may decide to accept one or not. And then subject to that, they'll make a decision. And then obviously the decision has to be made in open, like every other decision we have on contract negotiations.
It's my view that the discussion as to what to do with that property should be done in open.
And I'm not disputing that. But until you know what the options are based on the discussion that we're going to have based on the proponents making offers, we have no idea what those discussions will lead to.
Because there's a lot more options that aren't included in the offers. That's why, because there's other options that aren't on the table yet.
And so you're right. And so council could decide not to accept any of those offers that have been made.
Councillor Redden?
I'm more towards the warden here, I think, than the CAO. But I kind of think a useful middle road might be having the offers presented to us in closed, and then not discuss them there so much. But then we can talk about them then we can enter into a general discussion much better informed in open. And I think we're all clever enough people here. We can have a conversation and not need to refer to particulars. I don't know how that works out contract negotiation wise stuff, but this isn't in my backyard. And so I'm trying to get my sentence together here. It's not directly affecting what I see out my window every day. And so I'm looking at this with what we do, and you've got the county as a whole, plus what you're going to do to a community when you sell this property. And I feel like I'm looking at it from quite a ways away, and I do want to be informed, but I really feel that this needs to be a conversation that is in public, so the public's informed. It's really important that we have a conversation here before we make decisions so that people have time to respond. Both committee of the whole to subcommittees to anything, right? Like that's my thought.
Councillor Longmire?
Thank you. And I quite feel the same way. I'm really leaning towards Warden Parish and most of the points that Councillor Redden has brought up. And although it's not in my backdoor yard, it's going to have a huge impact in the county because we go through each other's communities. So I know why we would go in camera because there are sensitive information that's going to be shared, but at the same time, it's extremely important for citizens to be able to hear all the options, and we might come up with additional options today that that we haven't thought of. And so I like that opportunity to hear those before we see what those documents that have come forth on a proposal. Thank you.
Deputy Warden?
Thank you. If I answered an RFP, or request for proposal, with an option to buy, purchase, or do something with a property the municipality owned, and all of a sudden that was talked about in public session of council, I would have issue with that. As a matter of fact, I may have issue to the point where I may end up suing the municipality that I did that RFP with, because they've let out pertinent information about my response to their RFP. They may well damage my chance at financing such a thing. They may, turn public opinion against me. I would suggest that we follow the direction of the CAO and talk about the contractual matters of these in camera, in closed session. And then when we have, when we want to actually talk about what might happen with the school and the rest of it and keep it open to the public, then have that in public. But any of these contract negotiations, we can't be discussing those in open session. My God, that would be catastrophic to our legal file. Well, you can shake your head all you like, but I mean, the long and the short of it is it will. If you talk about contract negotiations in open, we're going to be in trouble. Thank you.
I don't know who is shaking their head.
Well,
just to clarify, it wasn't an RFP. Property was listed, and these are offers coming in from the listing. Councillor Prout?
Thank you. I think information is power, and we know there are a number of offers. I tend to agree with the CAO on this. We can always come out and talk about afterwards, but I think it's important for us to have a full and frank discussion, perhaps in camera first, and then if we want to talk about other options, when we come out in open, we can make a decision as to what options interest us and go from there. I do that. That's my thought on it. I mean, I'm not trying to hide in camera on the issue, but I think it's important to go over what is there now and what we might wish to explore beyond that. That's just my thought. I'm cognizant of the deputy warden's comments, whether it's an RFP or these are offers from a number of entities. It's my understanding. So thank you.
Councillor Cotw?
I feel the same way, is that you're treading a fine line there. If we jumped on there in public forum and started talking about our offers on the internet, what do you think is going to happen there? Same as the school. To me, I understand that it has to be open for the people in the community to voice their opinion, but how long we've had this on discussion for months that the school was going up for sale. It's not that we've been hiding it. You had a community meeting and you guys allude to that they were going to be sold. It's been on our council minutes several times that the property was going to be sold. We entertained getting a real estate. We're beating a dead horse. We said we were going to sell it. So, and I disagree fully on discussing any contract, no matter what it is, out in the public forum until we've discussed it in camera, figured if that's the way we're going. I agree with Deputy Warden Gunn. If I was a contractor and bid on something and you let out what I wanted to do and what I was paying, somebody would pay. And it's, to me, you just cut your own throat, because the next time there was a question or answer wanting somebody to put in a bid on something, I'd say, yeah, later. I think we do it the same as we've always done it. Talk about it in camera. If we don't want to go with any of them discussions right now, go in open forum and discuss again. What are we going to do with this school that we've had for 7 or 8 years now that's been shut down and rotten?
Okay, I'm getting a consensus that we will discuss this in camera today. We did, if I could just respond to Councillor Connell, we did decide to list it. We've got some offers. That's been good information that we now have, that we know what value it might have if we do sell it. But there are still other possibilities, affordable housing. We could demolish the building, put up building lots. There's all kinds of options, and those need to be discussed, in my view, in open, but let's deal with it closed today and see where we go on that. Councillor Hudson?
Yes. I agree with what's being said, but I still would agree with the warden in that it should be an agenda item for our council meeting next week. We will go into closed later today to perhaps discuss those contract negotiations. And when we have council meeting next Tuesday, we will have that information. And so I don't really see a problem in moving or putting it on the agenda for next week. I think that perhaps is a good way to proceed.
Well, we can do that after we discuss it in closed. And maybe that's the result that will come from the closed discussion. We'll deal with this, discuss it in closed, and see where we come out. We're trying to work as a group of 11 here, so here we go. Okay, so I'm not moving forward. So with 5.2, so that's dealt with. 5.3. Former Bridgetown Town Hall. This was, again, notice of motion from me, and I'm only going ahead today with a portion of that motion, and that's the one to start the process for the municipal heritage property. So I'm going to leave the chair. The deputy warden will take the chair, and the motion that I'm going to make is, I'll read it out. It's only a part of the notice that's on 5.3. So Deputy Warden, are you in the chair?
I'm in the chair.
Okay. So Madam Clerk, if you could just take a look at the 5.3, and I'll just read out a little change in wording.
Yes.
That municipal council begin the process to register the former Bridgetown Town Hall as a municipal heritage property. And then if you go down in the third last line, and that the former town hall property not be sold until the heritage property registration process is completed. Okay, that's, did you get that, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Is there a seconder? Well, no, I'm not in the chair. That's my motion.
Yeah, so can I just get you clarify that, Warden, that we're just going to take that whole middle part out? Is that it?
That's it. Yeah, we're taking that out.
Okay, until, and that the former, okay. Yep. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Hudson.
So if I could speak to my motion?
Yes, sir.
There are three. First of all, I want to make it clear to everybody that this motion is not for a decision today as to whether to register this building as a heritage property. This is only a motion to begin the process, so that, as I understand it, then what would happen is that staff would do a report to the Heritage Advisory Committee, and the Heritage Advisory Committee would have a meeting, and they would make a determination as to whether this building qualified to be a municipally registered heritage property, and then they would make a recommendation to council, and at that point, council would decide what they wanted to do. This motion is only to begin the process. So having clarified that, as far as this building is concerned, there are three reasons why I want to move this forward. First of all, architecturally, the former Bridgetown Town Hall building is really the only arts and crafts style building in Annapolis County. Annapolis County has a wealth of Georgian buildings up until about 1837, prior to 1837. It has a wealth of Victorian buildings, in particular Bridgetown does. There's also a great number of arts and crafts buildings, which were built usually in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. This is the only Art Deco building built in the 1930s. So architecturally, I think it's an important building to preserve in its form. Secondly, it has an important history in the town of Bridgetown. It was built in the 1930s as the post office. And it was purchased by the town in 1973 and converted to the town hall offices. So it's always been a community building in the Bridgetown community. And thirdly, the site is probably the most prominent site in Bridgetown, right at the intersection of Queen Street and Granville Road. So for that reason, I think that it should be considered as possibly a municipally registered heritage property. Thank you.
Any other questions?
May I clarify
Councillor
the
Redmond.
motion? May I clarify the motion?
Yes.
It was moved by Warden Parrish, seconded by Councillor Hudson, that municipal council begin the process to register the former Bridgetown Town Hall as a municipal heritage property, and that the former town hall property not be sold until the registration process is complete.
Completed, yeah.
That was it.
What if it doesn't get completed?
Well, until it's, well, it may or may not be.
Okay.
If the property registration process is completed and council decides not to register it, then the process is completed.
Okay. Double checking.
Yeah.
Questions? Councillor Redmond.
I'm very curious about the building materials for this building and where they were sourced. It's a sandstone exteriors, my recollection. Is that local? Is it from Wallace? Is it, anybody have any ideas? Curious.
I don't.
I certainly don't, but it seems to me most of the sandstone we get comes from up the other end of the province, up around Pictou Way, doesn't it? Up around there, there's a quarry.
In Wallace.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Wallace sandstone was exported up and down the entire eastern seaboard. It has very significant historical things in my mind. It's still an active pit, actually, exporting building stone. But yeah, no, I was just curious if it was from there or something more local. Rock nerd.
Councillor Sheridan.
I'm just, I understand the importance of this being a heritage building property. I'm just wondering, why is it that it couldn't be sold with an agreement attached to it stating that it is going to be turned into a heritage property? and instead of holding up the sale of the property? Would that be a possibility?
I would have to hand that to the CAO to answer that.
If I may, Mr. Acting Chair, I think if I can go back to the comments that the warden made about the elementary school, maybe those are discussions we should be having about the town hall. Are we interested in selling it or not? And I agree with Councillor Sheridan. If we impose this potential restriction on the facility, does that limit the ability for us to sell the property? So I think maybe the first question is, are we in fact interested in selling this property? And if we're interested in selling this property, should we be restricting it? And I totally agree with the comment that we do have the ability to have site plan control, that we can prevent any change to this building. That will be an agreement that we have if we decide to sell it. I'm not sure where council is on this one. I mean, certainly the elementary school, we've had many discussions on whether we want to dispose of that property or not. But we haven't had those discussions about the town hall. And I do understand the significance of the town hall. And it's got more significance to the county, not just the community of Bridgetown, but the county, than the elementary school does. So should we be having a bigger discussion about whether we want to sell? But I totally agree with what Councillor Sheridan has said, is that if we decide to sell the property, putting a heritage designation on it does restrict the potential for selling it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments?
If I could just close the discussion, the
Go ahead,
deputy,
everyone.
the CEO is correct. If you have if in fact council decides in the future to put a heritage designation on it, it would restrict the sale of the building. But to me, I wouldn't want to see, a picture window in the front down the road and some big, flashing green sign and the building basically let go completely. I think it's important that whoever does buy the building, as far as I'm concerned, we do need to sell it. But it's important that it be maintained the way it looks now.
And if I can add to that, Warden, I'd hate to have that building sold, and as I've said before, in a lot of these cases, 6 months later, see a planer backed up to the window. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for a question. Call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 You have to call for opposed.
Oh yeah, opposed. Any opposed to that? Seeing none, the motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
I'll give the chair back to the warden here.
Thank you very much. Where are we? New business. Information report, community development update, January 2022. Let me just find that in my materials here. That's page 29.
6.2.
I have it. Are there any questions with respect to the report?
I have a question.
I heard somebody say they had a question. Councilor LeBlanc?
Number 5, the East End area planning strategy. I see that we're trying to set times and date for the first meeting. I know with the situation that we're in at this time, it's going to be difficult. So are we even going ahead, or how are we going ahead with this? That's basically, I guess, my question. Any of these?
I see Ms. Bent here. Can you, maybe Mr. Dick or Ms. Bent, would one of you be able to respond?
I can. Staff are looking at ways to initiate the first batch of meetings through Zoom. We've started that process with our Upper Clements area advisory, and it's going well so far.
Excellent.
We're hoping to start it through Zoom and then see where we go from there. But the first initial meetings are pretty straightforward. So I think Zoom would be a good way to start.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Councillor Connell?
So if somebody has a request to be looked at in those zones, can that person send a letter through to the planning department or
Yes,
drop it off at Lawrencetown?
Sure can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Prout, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I know in the report it mentions to set the time and date for the first meeting, and I think you're correct that it probably will, the first one at least by Zoom, unless things change pretty rapidly. Do you have just a rough timeline? Are we looking at some point perhaps in March? I don't know.
I had a team meeting with my planners just yesterday, and Brendan is hoping to reach out here fairly soon and maybe start something the first week or two in March, if that's if we can get everybody on board.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just to follow up to Councillor Connell's comment, I know there's at least one interested person in District 1 who, when I spoke to them last fall about an issue, I said there would be a sort of a review of rules and regulations coming up sometime in the spring. So I guess I will give them a call and suggest they could forward their name and their concern, as Councillor Connell has suggested, to perhaps to you or to the planning department.
Sure.
With that. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, as you know, it is a very public participation process. We want to get it right this go around instead of heading back to amendments after we're said and done. So we're open for everything that people are interested in, and everything can be looked at.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Deputy Warden?
Thank you. Are the Zoom meetings considered public meetings? You know, the government wouldn't accept this form of public meeting when we were looking to establish a waste transfer station in West Paradise there. So I'm just curious, as with this province-wide planning, if they'll accept Zoom meetings as a public format, and why, and have they made that change? Not and why have they made that change? Have they made that change? Thank you.
Is there anyone that's able to respond to that inquiry?
I do know that staff have done some research on other municipal units starting their own planning processes, and they are using Zoom. And of course, we are going to try really hard to get the word out to the public. And if somebody wants to participate in the Zoom meeting, they will let us know, and then we will get them connected. That's the best we can do. Why, if it's changed, I'm not aware. Maybe Carolyn can better speak to how Zoom works. She's our in-house expert on the Zoom.
Madam Clerk?
I'll just add that the public meeting process in West Paradise was not taking place during COVID. This is during COVID, so Zoom has become an acceptable platform throughout provincial municipalities in Nova Scotia as a public participation platform.
Thank you for that.
May I?
Yes, Deputy Warden?
Thank you. One of the stumbling blocks with Department of Environment was that we didn't have, and they wouldn't, and they relinquished our permit for the transfer station we had going there, was the fact that we didn't have a public meeting. We did have a public meeting in the West Paradise Hall that went completely out of control there. We could, the CAO couldn't control it at all, or at the time. So when we went to a Zoom meeting platform for the public meeting part of it, Mr. Ferguson our former CAO, said that the provincial government wouldn't accept a Zoom meeting as a public meeting. My question is quite simple as to whether that has changed with the government.
I believe that the clerk did indicate that it has changed and that those public meetings that were suggested with respect to the waste transfer station were prior to the emergency declarations relating to COVID. And since the emergency regulations from COVID, we're now allowed to have public meetings virtually.
Thank you.
Councillor Sheridan.
I just want to make a comment on the amount of the value, how it has increased in January compared to last January with the value of building permits. And to me, that does indicate that the planners are going to be quite busy if this continues with the permits that are being issued. So I just want to comment on, thank them for the job that they're doing. Thank you.
Councillor Redden.
Yeah, I was quite struck by what Councillor Sheridan had just mentioned there. And I think Mr. Gunn is looking for Section 19A of the Municipal Government Act, if he's curious.
Any other comments with respect to the community development update? Thank you. Well, I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move along to the next item on the agenda. That's the recommendation report regarding St. Andrew's Church in Lawrencetown.
Recommendation 6.2, recommendation report St. Andrew's Church. That municipal council approved the St. Andrew's Anglican Church application for substantial alteration to replace the amber window glass to clear glass, encouraging the applicant to retain some of the amber glass in the Gothic revival windows on the north and south side of the building as much as possible in accordance with the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor LeBlanc seconds. Discussion? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. The main part of this motion is composed of the first two lines. Encouraging the applicant indicates to me that maybe some of the members of the Heritage Advisory Committee did not want the amber window glass replaced. But I'm not sure whether those words belong in that motion. Are they in accordance with the approval to replace the glass? We're saying, on one hand, you can replace the glass. On the other hand, we're saying, be careful what you do. Just a question. Thank you.
Councillor LeBlanc.
We had a really lengthy meeting on this, and we did also have the applicant on the phone so he could hear what our discussion was. And there were some problems in being able to get amber glass. So the applicants had asked us to replace the glass, period. And it has to be replaced because they're broken or shattered or missing or whatever the case may be. So in our recommendation, the only thing we could do, we couldn't tell him, go find something you can't find. So we recommended that he could retain some of it by using the glass that he had left over in some way in the Gothic windows, and hopefully keep some of that amber glass in it as much as possible. So for the length of our conversation, this was the best way to be able to encourage the applicant to do the job.
Thank you. Councillor Sheridan?
So just to elaborate a little bit more on the glass, because the glass is so old, we weren't sure if he'd be able to, to remove the glass without it shattering. So that's why the encourage part was in there, is if it was possible. It wasn't, because we don't even know if it's possible that the glass may all shatter when it's being taken out. So they just said if it was possible. So the wording came from, well, if it's very possible, then he'd be able to put a piece of amber glass maybe in the top portion of the window. And to my recollection, that's where it all came from. I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the glass. Thank you.
Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. And I now understand more of the atmosphere of the meeting. But all the applicant, what we are doing if we adopt this motion in its entirety is that we are approving replacing the amber glass to clear glass, period. If they decide they can save some of it, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it has no effect on the main recommendation. Thank you.
Any other comments? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. I can only think that if they left a little bit of the amber glass in the top of those windows and put some clear glass in down below, it would be absolutely stunning. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor LeBlanc?
And the discussion, as I said before, was very lengthy. So this is what the committee came up with. However, I mean, our council can reject this motion and make another motion. And I understand what everybody is talking about the first part of the glass. Councillor Morrison is correct, and that's where our dilemma was. But we want this to happen, and we also want, but consider keeping some of the amber glass. And I'll leave it to that.
Anybody else? Councillor Barto?
Yes, it was a lengthy conversation. I think it was longer than any conversation we've ever had on anything. So we did due consideration. We were trying to find the best solution, and it was hard to say you have to maintain that amber glass, because we didn't know whether there was going to be portions of it left large enough for use when he was done. That's why putting him in the Gothic tops of the windows, if possible, might have been a reasonable solution to be able to utilize some of the existing glass for the history of the building. But understanding that the accessibility of it, if the pieces were broke and we had no way of telling the owner to install something that was not accessible. So anyway, the bottom line is the motion is a little vague. I thank Councillor Morrison for pointing that out, but I think the bottom line is it can be completely replaced with the clear glass. But I think the owner is sympathetic enough that if at all possible, they were sitting in on the meeting via telephone, that they will do their best, understanding our point of view. But if council decides to rewrite that motion, that would be fine too. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote for the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I-
Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Next is 6.3, recommendation report, REMO.
6.3, C6 Regional Emergency Management Bylaw. That municipal council give first reading to approve the C6 Regional Emergency Management Bylaw as circulated.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Longmire seconds. Discussion?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, discussion? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. I've got to find it here in the agenda. It gives you an awful lot of authority as warden.
Yeah, that's what I think too, yeah.
You get to, that was going to be my point. You get to, if Annapolis or Middleton has a problem, you get to declare the state of emergency.
But I would
find
think.
it very interesting, and how I find it one more step closer to amalgamation. But anyway, that's what I wanted to point out. It gives Annapolis County an awfully lot of authority over a couple of other small municipalities. Thank you.
Just to respond to that, I would think that I would make any declaration based on the advice of staff. But yeah, in the end, that's the way it reads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just pointing that out.
Councilor LeBlanc?
I'm looking at page 54 of 89.
Okay, let me just turn that up, Councilor LeBlanc.
Certainly.
I have it.
And it's looking at the budget itself. And I do realize that the budget was determined on the number of percentage for the population in each of our designated municipalities. However, I do have a question about the salary. If we have one member or one person that delivers this job for 3 municipalities, my thought automatically would be, well, we would share equally the cost of the salary for this person. But it is totally directed, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, on numbers of a population. So could I have more of an explanation on the division? I know there's a formula and I see the numbers and I see the population, but how is that? How is the salaries of a person not divided by 3 if they're doing the job for 3 municipalities? Just a question. I'm sure I'll get in trouble with this.
Ms. Campbell, I see your hand up.
I'm wondering if you want to deal with the motion about the bylaw first and then move on to the questions about the intermunicipal agreement, because I'd be happy to answer questions about the financial formula that's actually in the intermunicipal agreement.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Councilor Blanc, do you see what Ms. Campbell's pointing out? So she's suggesting you bring that up under 6.4 instead of where we are now. Is that all right? Okay. Any other comments on the motion on the floor? Which is 6.3. Deputy Warden?
Shouldn't have this been reversed in the thing? Shouldn't we talk about the intermunicipal service agreement first before we got into the 6.3? 6.4 should have been dealt with before 6.3. If that's the case.
Ms. Campbell, can you respond to that?
Sorry, that didn't occur to me when I did the report. If you'd like to reverse the order of consideration, that's entirely up to committee of the whole, and I would certainly raise no objections.
So would someone like to move to adjourn the 6.3 consideration until after we've dealt with 6.4?
So moved.
The Deputy Warden moves, seconded by Councillor Redden. Discussion just to adjourn this until after we've discussed 6.4. Is there any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. So Deputy Warden, would you like to read 6.4?
6.4, intermunicipal emergency services agreement. That municipal council or approve the intermunicipal emergency services agreement as circulated.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Sheridan seconds. Now I think I'll go to Councillor LeBlanc.
Well, I already posed my question, so I'm sure that somebody's ready to answer.
Okay. Ms. Campbell, would you like to respond?
So through a consultation process that occurred between CAOs, it was decided that a model developed by Kings County regional municipalities would be adopted and adapted for presentation in the County of Annapolis. This intermunicipal agreement is based on the model that was established in Kings County, but adopted for our municipality. As in the past with our municipality and other municipalities, the funding formula is based on a base rate of a dollar amount with actual expenditures being divided up based on a formula comprised 50% of uniform assessment and 50% on population. As I believe Councillor LeBlanc was making the point of a principle of how these kinds of organizations get funded, there are absolutely many ways that you can look at what is the fairest way to divide this up. I certainly understand her point that if there is a staff person, in this case, a 50% staff person augmented by 10% of another person's position who backs up, there is a viewpoint that the base salary that forms part of the budget should be divided equally 3 ways, with the remainder of the budget divided based on a formula.
Thank you.
We're paying a lot more though.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Prout?
Thank you. I noticed that as well, and I understand Ms. Campbell's explanation, and someone that lives close to Kings County, I don't always think they do always saying they're the best ones to follow. But no, my thought was, if a third each is too steep, and I get the argument that for Annapolis Oil, for instance, a third is a high bar, and somewhat for Middleton. But even if we were to look at a 50% for the county and 25 for each of the other 2 units, I think that would be a fairer way to look at it. If a third was too steep, what would it cost, or what is it currently costing the others for what they are putting together for the same thing? That's my question, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Aren't those the numbers in green and yellow there on that page, Councillor Prout?
I don't have anything in yellow on my printout, so not on page.
I might be wrong, but on page 54 of 89, it says total projected municipal contributions, county, Middleton, Annapolis Royal.
Yes, I have that. Those, but I'm thinking, as Councillor LeBlanc has said, that we might as well round it to 50,000, whereas the other one's 7 and one is 5, or rounding the numbers off.
Yeah,
We're not that far off.
okay.
I think we are carrying quite a bit of the burden. And I get that we're the biggest geographically, and that you, Mr. Warden, will be calling the shots. So, but just looking at the cost of it, that was the thought. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ms. Campbell.
No, I don't think there was any interruption. Thank you, Councillor Proud. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the motion on the floor? Ms. Campbell, would you like to say something?
I'm wondering if it might be timely to provide some information that could be helpful in this consideration. But I don't want to confuse you with numbers, so stop me if I'm being counterproductive in providing this information. Currently, under the intermunicipal agreement that we have in place, the county is paying a base charge of $5,000, and each of the towns are paying a base charge of approximately, exactly $2,500. Then the residual is based on the exact same formula that's in this document, uniform assessment and population. In the past, that has equated to, for example, for the town of Annapolis Royal, contribution of approximately $3,700 to $4,000 based on actual expenditures. The other piece of information that I think would be useful for your discussion is this. When we first proposed the intermunicipal agreement based on Kings County's model is a base charge of $6,000, the remainder by this formula. I reduced it in the model. I circulated to $5,500, and that was turned down by the town of Annapolis Royal. So we renegotiated several times over a matter of weeks and months. And what ended up being acceptable to the town of Annapolis Royal was a base charge of $3,500, and they accepted a $6,000 increase in the budget bribe for a comfort center project. So if you want to change it, absolutely your prerogative to do so. Perhaps we should even look at how we do municipal cooperative services going forward and the whole philosophy of that. If we are going to go back to the town of Annapolis Royal, that our council wishes to change it, I believe that it will be difficult to achieve agreement.
Councillor Redden?
I'm just looking for, and Don, that actually answered a couple of my questions that I wasn't necessarily going to bring up here, but we're floating around back there. So thank you very much. That on a per capita basis, we are paying the least, and Annapolis Royal is paying significantly more. I'm fairly happy with this. Well, more than fairly happy with this payment structure.
Thank you for that. Councillor LeBlanc?
Well, thank you, because I needed the conversation to go forward and to be discussed. However, if we agree to the motion, that means that this will go on indefinitely. It's not a 1 year, it's not a 2 year, it's not a 5 year. It's an agreement that will go on indefinitely. So should that be looked at?
Would someone on staff be prepared to respond to the length of the agreement we're entering into? I myself didn't pick up that there was a term to the agreement, whether there was or there wasn't, so I don't know. Council, Ms. Campbell?
The proposal is that it would be put in place and would stay in place as the previous intermunicipal agreement has until replaced.
And I take it any party could commence discussions to replace the agreement at some point in time, correct? Yeah. Any other questions or comments with respect to the intermunicipal emergency services agreement? Councilor LeBlanc?
I don't disagree with it. It's the point that it's not being looked at after a certain number of years, and we have gone I don't know how many years discussing this particular issue and trying to come to actually where we are right now. However, if it's not on the table to discuss in 5 years or whatever number you would want to discuss, depending on, you know, different costs go up and up and up. I don't know if it's going to be looked at and taken seriously because it took so long, and I don't mean it in that way either. It just took so long to get to this point, and I know that Ms. Campbell has worked very hard on this, and we've discussed it before. But I thought maybe we should have a term or a number that we can review because things change, especially in emergency services. But if it's to be left as it is, I guess we'll leave it as is.
Councillor Bartow?
Does it not address that in term and termination item 28? And it says something about review or considerations by council of participating units no later than the 31st each year.
Ms. Campbell?
Page 48 of 89.
And I'm just looking up the section, but I believe the section you're referring to is consideration of the budget for the upcoming year.
Oh,
I should note there is a mistake on page 49 because it talks about a base charge of $5,500. That should have been changed to $3,500 based on the formula described in the appendix. I will make that change.
Okay, I think I'll move along. I saw another hand up. Was it Councillor Longmire? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Councillor LeBlanc. I would like to see that considered.
Meaning a termination date?
Correct. Review date, termination date, yes.
Any other comments? I don't see any hands up, so I guess I'll
just
Deputy Warden, yes.
Thank you. I'm kind of read through this. Didn't kind of read it. I read through it all. But I mean, in one of my notes here I have is this not just besides is a step towards amalgamation, but are we duplicating that what's already being done by the government in some respects with this?
Would someone from staff like to respond to that?
I mean, my question being, if there's an emergency, are we here to say that the provincial government won't do anything about it? Or are we saying that if there's an emergency, it's just on Annapolis County to get it dealt with?
Ms. Campbell?
I'm trying to find the words to explain it that doesn't create confusion. So in the Emergency Management Act, different types of emergencies are described. Some are described as local states of emergency. And under the Emergency Management Act, only municipal councils have the authority to declare a state of local emergency. The province does have the power to declare emergencies, certainly province-wide. They would tend not to do that if it's a very localized emergency limited to one or just a few municipalities. Under the Act, they do support a state of local emergency, and there are many things they do to consult, support, provide personnel. But municipal governments are definitely in the driver's seat on declaring a state of local emergency and piloting through that process.
once we,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have to finish up on this.
Yeah,
I'll come back.
yeah.
Once the state of the emergency is declared, what action do we actually take as a municipality?
Yeah, Ms. Campbell?
It depends on the emergency. So the premise of a state of local emergency is that you have a number of local emergency responders responding to a circumstance, be it a flood, a winter storm, an electrical outage, an aircraft down. It can be many, many different things. The emergency responders respond, and when the circumstance going on exceeds the ability of the local emergency responder to deal with it, that's when a state of local emergency is considered. And the purpose of that is to go outside the local area and to extend beyond the local providers to access resources that are required to address the emergency. And that's where the province comes in and other municipalities come in providing that assistance.
Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. Let me begin by congratulating those who were in on what I know to have been very diplomatic discussions and negotiations that resulted in the drafting of the papers we have before us here today. I was chair of the County Remo Committee for a year or two, and I know how difficult it was to achieve any sort of agreement on any subject at all. And indeed, some of the discussions were around whether agreement was a good goal to have. I've taught this subject at the master's level in university for a couple of years. And one of the principles I would always say to the students is that response to a disaster is from the ground up, not from the top down. And that applies, first of all, to actions. And as Dawn has explained, actions taken at the local level. And then when it is deemed they need to be expanded or the local level needs more, the province will step in. And it's the same with reimbursement. Local levels have to spend the money and then spend, oh gee whiz, up to 6 or 8 years trying to get it back from the federal government. And I think that, returning to my initial remarks, the people who negotiated what we have before us did so, of course, in good faith and have achieved a very reasonable suggested solution. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. We're voting on 6.4 with respect to the Intermunicipal Emergency Services Agreement. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. So we'll go back to 6.3. Deputy Warden, would you like, Councillor Prout?
Thank you. I just looking at the clock, were we not going to have a presentation at 11? We've kind of.
Yeah, we are. I was thinking we might break at 11:15 and then come back for the presentation. But Councillor Prout, if you'd like to break now.
Oh, no, sorry. I was. I'd learned to tell time with a regular watch, but the light was gleaming off it. And I thought, my gosh, the morning's going quickly. It's 20 after 11. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay. Deputy Warden, 6.3.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So the motion is already on the table,
Yeah, recommendation.
if you care to lift it back. Table.
If we just adjourned it, then it's still on the table? Okay.
Yes.
So, councillors, 6.3 is on the table. You have it in front of you in any way on the agenda. Discussion on 6.3.
If I may make a comment.
Yes.
Each of the 3 municipalities passes their own bylaw. So this C6 Regional Emergency Management Bylaw is the county's bylaw. The town of Annapolis Royal has passed a bylaw for the town of Annapolis Royal. And the town of Middleton has passed a bylaw for the town of Middleton. So this gives the warden the power because he is the warden of the county of Annapolis. And this is a county of Annapolis bylaw.
Thank you. Discussion on 6.3. Deputy Warden.
Thank you. Now I'm really confused. So Annapolis Royal has passed their bylaw. Middleton has passed their bylaw. Do they reflect our bylaw that we're about or trying to pass? Are on board with that, or have they come up with something that the warden's not even going to know much about?
I see Ms. Campbell agreeing with in the affirmative with your suggestion that the other bylaws are similar to ours. Is that right, Ms. Campbell?
They are identical except for in the places that it says County of Annapolis, it says Town of Annapolis Royal or Town of Middleton. In the places where it says Warden, it says Mayor.
So their mayor gets to declare a state of emergency, not our warden, that the bylaw said, or that this thing says. So it's actually their mayor. And that's a complete misstatement saying that our warden acts. Okay. If people can live with that, thank you.
Our warden acts on behalf of the municipality of the county of Annapolis. The mayor of the town of Annapolis Royal acts on behalf of the town of Annapolis Royal. And the mayor of the town of Middleton acts on behalf of the town of Middleton.
Seems to me that when I go into this here somewhere, it says that the warden acts for all of the municipality, declares for all of the municipality. That I made that point earlier, and we sort of seem to be in agreement with it. But whatever, I'm not going to beat this horse.
I think that's if it's a regional emergency. There could be an emergency just in the town of Annapolis Royal, in which case the mayor would declare the emergency just in the town of Annapolis Royal, wouldn't affect the county. But there are some emergencies that would affect both, in which case it becomes regional. And then in that case, the warden of the county is the one of the three elected leaders that will make the decision. Do I have that right, Ms. Campbell?
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments on 6.3? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. So we're down to 6.5.
6.5, letter of request to minister responsible for emergency management, that municipal council approve forwarding the letter of request to the minister responsible for emergency management, Honorable John Lohr.
Is there a second for that? Councillor Sheridan seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. 6.6.
6.6, recommendation report. Appointment Victoria Hamilton. That municipal council appoint Victoria Hamilton to act as a development officer for the municipality of the county of Annapolis to administer the municipality's land use bylaws and subdivision bylaw.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor LeBlanc seconds. Discussion? Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. There appears to be a difference between the motion just read and the recommendation that is in the report on page 56.
Let me just pull that up, Councillor Morrison. And what's the difference?
Well, the 6.6 on page 4, municipal council appoint Victoria Hamilton to act as a development officer. And the recommendation is that municipal council appoint Victoria Hamilton as a development officer.
Right.
And if you really wanted to get into it, there's an enormous difference between the two, if you wanted to get into it. But
God, Alec, you got to point it out.
well,
I see what you're
one
saying,
says-
Councilor Morrison. Yeah, I see. I do see what you're saying. One's an
one
acting.
says she can act as a development officer, and the other one appoints her as a development officer.
Got it. Thank you.
And I would think the recommendation, as on page 56, should be the motion.
I would ask somebody, I see the difference, and thank you for pointing that out. And I would ask staff as to which way they'd like to go on this, whether Ms. Bant?
We would like for her to be appointed as a development officer to administer your land use bylaws and the subdivision bylaw, please.
So Councillor Morrison, would you like to make an amendment to the motion to remove the words to act?
Yes, thank you.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor LeBlanc seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Now discussion on the motion as amended. Seeing none, now I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. 6.7.
Recommendation 6.7, that municipal council appoint Brendan Lamb as a development officer for the municipality of the County of Annapolis to administer the municipality's land use bylaws and subdivision bylaw.
Seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. And Madam Clerk, I do note that the motion as read out reflects recommendation in the report rather than on the agenda.
Yes.
Which I believe is the correct way to go. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Longmire?
Thanks. I just wanted to get an understanding as to why the recommendation or the appointment would be actually prepared by Mr. Lamb as opposed to, like, he's the appointee, right? So I'm just wondering why it was prepared by him and not someone else in HR.
Well, somebody had to do it. I asked him to prepare both of those reports and then I signed off on them.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. 6.8.
6.8, recommendation report, municipality, registered property, application for substantial alterations, Clarence Community Hall. That municipal council refer the substantial alteration application for the alteration of replacing the roof and exterior trim boards for Clarence Community Hall, 3337 Clarence Road, to the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Second for that? Councilor LeBlanc seconds. Discussion? Councilor Barto? You're muted, but Councilor Barto?
Sorry, it may not be related to the specifics, but I think at some point we need to bring up the fact. When I was looking through the documentation, I picked up on some safety issues and accessibility issues. Now, whether we bring them to light now or through a different avenue, put them on another agenda for later on. But it would affect their budgeting as far as if they had to do extra work to correct those problems, and maybe it should be brought to light for them before they go ahead with the specifics on their the recommendation here. One is they're talking about maybe a metal roof, and the roof slopes down towards the entry walkway, and you could have a hazard there that could kill somebody if they walked under there and all the snow and ice slid off and hit them. Number two, the ramp is incorrectly constructed. It does not have a level area outside the door. You know, there's some question on the railing, and I'm not sure about the slope. But so there's issues that needs to be directed to our inspection department or planning to follow up on that. If we don't discuss any further, I'd like to see that moved up to that department for further investigation. Thank you.
Is there, I could ask staff, is there some coordination between what I'll call the building bylaw people and the heritage advisory people if this goes through the heritage advisory process?
If the alterations were to affect and require a building permit for the work they were doing, absolutely, we would, seek their advice on that. In this particular case, I understand they just want to replace the roofing material with metal, and they're going to do some repainting of the trim. But before they do that, there is some trim boards they need to replace. So in this case, there is not a building permit that is required to carry out that particular work they've requested to do at this time.
Thank you.
Due diligence, I had to bring that up because as a professional, I seen a problem and I had to report the problem. So where it goes from here is up to staff.
Right. Thank you for that, Councilor Bartow. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Where are we? 6.9. Councilor Hudson, you're going to, what are we going to do with you now? How do you leave?
I can put him in the waiting room
Okay,
once he declares out loud an interest in the following matter.
go ahead, Councilor Hudson.
Councillor Hudson, I need you to declare your interest.
Yes, I have a conflict on the treasurer for that association.
Thank you. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Oh, sorry. Hit the wrong button. Just give me a second here. Sorry, Deputy Warden.
Okay, Madam Clerk, are we all set?
Yes.
6.9, recommendation report, facilities operation agreement, BCRA. The municipal council approved the facilities operating agreement with the Bridgetown Community Recreation Association, BCRA, for the Bridgetown and District Memorial Arena, Bridgetown Centennial Pool, and Bridgetown Memorial Ballpark.
Is there a seconder for that? Councilor Longmire seconds. Discussion? Councilor Morrison?
Thank you. There is a difference in wording between the motion as just read and the recommendation on page 70.
Would you like me to read the recommendations, sir?
Let me just compare them myself just a minute here.
Yes, the clerk inserted who the agreement was with by adding the Bridgetown Community Recreation Association for the word.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Connell?
Yeah, I was reading that agreement and I was just, it wasn't clear to me, what does that association do with the funding we give them? What does that pay in that organization? Because it was lined out in the agreement that we pay for 2 individuals to run the arena, and we pay for a individual in the summertime to be a grounds person or whatever for the pool and the ballpark and stuff. So do we pay the wages of the 2 people for the arena? Do we pay them year round, or is it just for the season the arena is open as far as the skating arena?
Can someone on staff respond to Councillor Connell's inquiry?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Ms. Young, yes.
Each of the employees that are assigned to those locations are whatever hours that they work at that facility is what gets billed back for that. So we have one that's dedicated for the period that the arena is open, and then we have a secondary that does the weekend care oversight of the facility. For the pool, we have that same individual that looks after our parks in Bridgetown and the pool. There is a degree of knowledge and experience and expertise in terms of the chemicals at the pool and the ammonia plant at the arena. And that one individual has those qualifications.
So can I follow up with that?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Connell.
So do we have an individual that takes care of our community parks within our community? Do we have individuals that are assigned to them in the summertime? Or do the same employees are versatile and helps out districts in our county?
It is versatile. We do have like a parks maintenance laborer that if you want to look at Bridgetown and county separately, that individual does county and also assists with Bridgetown specific parks as well. And vice versa.
So going back to why do we pay them? Why do we pay the association? It was what, 16,000, it went up to 17,500 or something. What do they spend that money on?
So they're responsible for general operating expenses such as the heat and the lights. If they have to get people in to run certain things or to fix non-capital to fix operating equipment as such. This is to help facilitate that operation of that facility. The county also, because it is our facility, we assist and we take care of capital improvements. So if they should need a new roof, then that is something that we'll go and get grants for or use gas tax or reserves to help facilitate that repair or that replacement.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Sheridan?
So right now, isn't the staff person paid from the area rate that's collected in the town of Bridgetown? And is it going to continue with the area rate, or is this a new agreement or the same agreement that it's been in the past pertaining to area rates?
Is there someone that can respond to that?
Yeah.
There was a recreation in the breakdown that we had for area rates, and it did have recreation in there. So I was just curious to find out if this was part of the recreation.
I personally don't know if that's where that comes, if that is an impact to the base rate. I don't believe it is, but we can certainly find out.
I was with the understanding that the staff person was paid through the area rate in the community. And maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to have clarity on that when we go to discuss the area rates further. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.
Just give me a moment.
6:10.
Give me a moment to let Councillor Hudson back in after I finish typing.
Yeah.
And your presenter is also in the waiting room.
Councillor Morrison had a point to make, and we can do that, and then we'll break until 11. Councillor Morrison, you raised something at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes, thank you. 2 days ago, I attended, and Councillor Bartow and the warden, a briefing meeting conducted by the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipality and the CEO of that organization. And it's my intent to write a short report for council next week on this subject, and I'll send a copy for comment to the warden, Councillor Bartow, and if there were any other councillors at that meeting, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
If I could receive that by Wednesday for the agenda package, please.
Well, thank you. I think we'll take a break now, and we'll come back at 11, and we'll have the presentation from the TCTS Society. So well, the next item on the agenda is the presentation by the Trans-County Transportation Society, and we welcome Ms. Hackenschmidt to make the presentation on behalf of the society. So unless there's anything further, we invite you to go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. I know you all have the presentation in front of you, but I'm just going to share my screen. Just got to find it now. There it is. Okay. Oops. Okay. Good morning. My name is Nicole Hackenschmidt. I am the General Manager of Trans-County Transportation. Thank you for taking the time this morning. Sorry to hear my presentation. Since I don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to get right into it. I won't go over all the slides with you, but highlight just the important parts of the presentation, and then I'm here to answer any of your questions that you may have afterwards. Here, there we go. As you all know, TCTS is a not-for-profit organization that provides an appointment-driven, door-to-door, affordable, and accessible transportation services to the residents in our community. We have a fleet of 12 vehicles. 9 of those are accessible with 3 regular minivans. We have a staff of 9, which means we have 7 drivers, 1 dispatcher, and a manager. And now here's the big question. Why am I here this morning? We are requesting additional funding from the County of Annapolis to help sustain our reduced fares that were put into place in 2019. As you can see in this slide, the pandemic has put quite a strain on our organization since 2020 until now. with a decrease of revenue of 40% in the 2020-21 year and 30% decrease in our 21-22 year so far. Although TCTS was very fortunate to be granted the Fair Assistance Program funding from the province to help our low-income clients who do not have any other coverage. An example of that would be we have a few clients that we transport to dialysis on a regular basis. They are not able to cover the whole cost, but with the program, we were able to make it affordable. With that, TCTS would not be able to help those living in poverty. We have seen a substantial increase in not only fuel, but in maintenance, equipment, supplies, and of course, the cost of living. Without this funding request, TCTS will be forced to pass the burden on to our residents. Our staff will not be able to see their wages increase to what they deserve, to acknowledge their above and beyond duties while serving our residents during this exceptionally hard time. As you can see in this slide, if you look at the past 3 years until present, Kings County is providing approximately 45% of our operating funding for only serving 30% of our clientele. TCTS is now into their second year contract with the County of Kings, providing a 1% increase each year, and the town of Milton has funded us $1,500 per year since 2019. The last time Annapolis County increased TCTS's funding was in 2015 at $5,000, from $30,000 to $35,000 a year. To sum up this presentation, I cannot stress strongly enough the importance of keeping our fares at their lower, more affordable rates for the residents of Annapolis and Western Kings County. The cost of living for residents is rapidly increasing with no end in sight. We do not want to have to add to residents' worries by increasing our rates significantly. TCTS remains committed to providing affordable, accessible transportation, and we hope that Annapolis County Council feels the same way. Our request is for Annapolis County to increase their funding to Trans-County Transportation by $25,000 for a total of $60,000 per fiscal year. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you very much. Can you put us back on the full screen there so I can see all of the counselors?
There we go.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the counselors? Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, both for the information you included in the slides and the brevity of your presentation. I was looking at the slide that says municipal funding support, and would I be correct in saying that you do not carry any passengers from the town of Annapolis Royal?
We do, yes. We do have clients from Annapolis Royal, but we do not receive any funding from the town of Annapolis Royal.
Have you asked?
We have, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Prout?
Yes, thank you. As you know, I am the county's representative for TCTS, and I've known a number of people, some from within District 1 and some from outside, who have depended on this service for dialysis, for trips to the doctor, for times when there have been back in the past when pre-COVID, I was a bit aware of it because my wife had served on the board briefly as a citizen volunteer. So I'm aware of the service that they provide, and they're doing a wonderful job. in my opinion. And while I may be a bit prejudiced in my view, where I have got to know a number of people, well, the people on the board, I know there are people in the area that if it wasn't subsidized, they'd really be struggling to provide it. And I know times are tight for everybody, but I think it's, in my opinion, and just as a person, I'm not speaking as a counselor here, it's a very worthwhile ask. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Councillor Longmire.
Thank you. And I would like to say as well, Nicole, I couldn't agree more. The service is outstanding. I know I have residents who use that service, and it's first class. Certainly the financial implications throughout COVID has created much challenge for many businesses, and yours is one of those businesses that we cannot go without. I'm only hopeful that in the future, perhaps we can even see more additional supports in your service, perhaps with staff people that can help with medical appointments and such, maybe taking some burden off our ambulance EHS service. But your request is definitely warranted. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Sheridan.
Thank you, Nicole, for your presentation. It was excellent. In regards to your avenues of funding, I am aware that the Soldiers Memorial Hospital Foundation gives you funding. Is there any other opportunities for funding that you have from different organizations?
So yes, Soldiers Memorial Foundation, they fund our medical shuttle. So that's a little bit different than our Trans-Canadian Transportation vans or service. So they are providing a funding towards going to Halifax or Bridgewater, all those other medical appointments that do cost quite a bit. The other people that fund that is the Bridgetown Pharmacy and also the Annapolis West Health Foundation. So other than that, that's all the other funding that we have at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Redden.
Thank you. I really want to echo Councillor Morrison's comments about your presentation. The brevity and clarity are excellent. I was curious if you knew off the top of your head how much your budget has gone up since 2015 when we last gave you an increase. Percentage-wise is fine. I'm just.
Yes. That I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that information to you if you would like.
Okay. And then, as many of you know, my partner, Elizabeth, is an occupational therapist. And I think this program ties into a lot of other issues in our county, keeping people in their homes long-term and things like that. And I see this as a real important piece into maintaining a lot of the health in our communities. And I'm broadly in support of funding increases, although I'm very concerned about what our budget is going to look like in a couple of months. Thanks.
Anyone else? Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you, Nicole, for such a great presentation. And it's like everybody else, we need your service, and we're all getting in that direction. And it doesn't take more than an accident to have a need of such a service. How you mentioned the fact that during COVID, well, of course, you had to shut down like everybody else, and the income's there. Did you receive any grants this year from the government, that it be provincial or federal, for the assistance in the COVID?
We did receive the wage subsidy from the federal government, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. So we did apply for that, which did help during those times where our fare income was quite low, but we're able to help offset the cost of our staff. And that's the only other subsidy we've received so far.
Okay, thank you for that.
I have a question, Ms. Hackenschmidt. I think this is a great service, fully supportive of it. But just for my own edification, how are the fares calculated? Is it just a mileage thing, or how does that work?
It's a little complex, but we do it by zones. So we have 11 zones, all the way from the Bear River line all the way to the Aylesford Road. And each area is put into zones. So wherever you live in that zone, it's a formula that we use to calculate where they're going and how much it would cost.
Is the time a factor? If the driver has to wait, say, at a hospital to take somebody home, is that a factor as well?
Within our fares, we do include an hour and a half of appointment time. Anything over that hour and a half, it is an extra $5 per half an hour. If, just for example, a dialysis client, we drop them off, they stay there for 4 to 5 hours. Our driver will not stay there. They will do another drive and then go back and pick them up. In that case, it would be a double fare.
And do all of your customers pay the same fare, or are there different groups depending on their income?
Well, like I've said in the presentation there, we do have the fare assistance program. So not everybody would pay the same fare depending on what their income is and if they need help. And it also depends on what area they're going to. So for example, from Bridgetown to Kemple would be, I think it's $64. From Annapolis to Kemple, you're looking at $90. So it all depends on where you live in our catchment area.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Anybody else? Deputy Warden?
Thank you very much. And I've been, reading notes here, and a lot of this I'll bring up at another date. But this is a great service you provide, picking people up at their homes, taking them to the hospital for appointments or eye care clinics or whatever. And I'm just wondering, it's in the long run, isn't this just isn't the municipality basically subsidizing our provincial healthcare system? This is another way we're left to subsidize this, because you're not taking people for groceries or anything like that, day-to-day living things. These are for health appointments. Is that right?
We also do groceries, and we take people for groceries. We take them to shopping centers. We also do private charters. So if somebody's in a nursing home and they want to get to a family's house for a special dinner or just a day away, we also do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I want to thank you, Ms. Hackenschmidt, for your presentation. Our budgeting process is coming up shortly, and I'm sure this will be considered by staff when we consider what amounts we can provide to your very worthy service. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
So next on the agenda is the CAO report, which is on page 84. And it's clear that Mr. Dick has been very busy over the past little while. I want to thank him for all the work that he's doing as set out in this report. It's hard to believe that he has time to do all these things. So anything you want to add, Mr. Dick, before I invite any questions? No? Any questions for Mr. Dick? Councillor Cotw.
Yeah, just a comment. It was nice to see the report, and I know he's our CAO is busy too, so it is good that he took time to just send us an overview of what he does for the month, and it sure helps us appreciate all the work that he does. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Cotw?
Yes, thank you. At some point, I think you mentioned, Mr. Dick, you had 2 hours a day to do something, and I don't know when you would fit you had 2 hours in a day that you weren't doing something. So no, thank you for the report, and it does highlight the efforts that you put in on our behalf. So thank you very much.
Mr. Warden, if I may, that 2 hours is my nap time. But if I may, I would also suggest that it's not just me pulling this level of work. It's all the staff here at the county as well. They're all pulling a fairly heavy load. Certainly they have been for the past 8 to 10 months that I've been here. So I thank them for their efforts as well.
Deputy Warden?
And thank you, and thank you, Mr. Dick, for all the work you've done. Just one simple correction: it's not the Cornwallis Legion; it would be the Clement Sport Legion, unless they've put a new one in Cornwallis. Thank you.
No, that might be from my home in Ontario. There's a Cornwall Legion, and maybe I just sort of got lost in the translation. My apologies.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll thank Mr. Dick again for his work and the report. We'll go on to my report. Let me just pull my notes up here. So since the last committee of the whole meeting, I met with Beth Earl, the executive director of the Annapolis Basin Conference Center, along with Mr. Dick and Councillor Morrison on January 12th at the ABCC to talk about their future. I met with our legal counsel and Mr. Dick regarding the statement of claim that Mr. Farron has served on us. Did that at the council offices. I attended a meeting with officers of the Clementsport Legion on January 19th, along with Mr. Dick and Councillor Morrison at the Legion, and it was very helpful for me to see all of the good work that community body does. I attended a Zoom meeting of the Annapolis County branch of the Federation of Agriculture on January the 19th, discussing what municipalities might be able to do for the Federation of Agriculture. I attended a Zoom meeting of the Annapolis Valley Intermunicipal Service Agreement Working Group on January the 21st. That was a meeting with all of the mayors, wardens, and CAOs of the different municipal units in the valley to discuss the ongoing issues relating to what I refer to as the pilot project. On February 1st, I had a luncheon meeting with Don Clark, the mayor of Berwick. On February 2nd, I had a luncheon meeting with Amory Boyer, the mayor of Annapolis Royal. On February 2nd, I attended a Zoom meeting of mayors and wardens of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities to discuss changes to the bylaws, and also that was all members. That's the issue that Councillor Morrison will be reporting on in more detail for our council meeting next week. Plus, there was all the other usual warden duties over the past month. Any questions about all of that?
Move to receive.
I don't think that's just a report. I don't think we need to receive it. So there is one other thing that I wanted to report on. Another thing I've been doing is reviewing and following the COVID protocols that come out from the province. And each time I hear them, I say to myself, can we meet in person rather than on Zoom? my understanding is that next Monday, February the 14th, is going to be another statement from the province about any changes to the protocols. So I'll be watching that carefully, and maybe we'll have some news for the council meeting next week. We'll wait to see how that is, but maybe next week we could have a discussion among the councillors as to whether we want to continue meeting on Zoom or whether it's possible to meet in person. And my understanding now is that there's still a 6-foot requirement. So we'd have to go back to ABCC if we wanted to do that. In a way, it's been quite convenient that we've been meeting on Zoom because of the weather. For those of us that have to travel, because we can't yet meet in the council chambers. So I thought I'd just mention that I've been following that, and perhaps there might be something on Monday that that'll fuel another discussion at the council meeting as to whether in March we want to try to go back to in-person at ABCC or whether we're content with the Zoom meetings. Thank you for that. Next, we have the report from the Trans-County Transportation Society, which has been circulated.
Want me to read that?
Let me just look at that. Yes, go ahead. I guess it needs to be
7.3, Trans-County Transportation Society. That Committee of the Whole received the Trans-County Transportation Report for information as circulated.
Is there a seconder for that? Councilor Crouch seconds. The report is in our package at page 85. Are there any questions or comments? We had a good discussion just a minute ago about TCTS. I don't see any hands up, so I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next, the Forestry Advisory Committee report.
7.4, Forestry Advisory Committee report. That Committee of the Whole received the Forestry Advisory Committee report for information as circulated.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hudson seconds. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next is a 7.5 request for proposal from Western Woodlot Services Cooperative.
Want me to read that out?
Yes, please.
7.5, request proposal from Western Woodlot Services Cooperative. That municipal council request a proposal from the Western Woodlot Services Cooperative to begin an ecological management process of a 15/20 hectare section of the Greywood site, PID 05091152, in accordance with the recommendation of the Forest Advisory Committee.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hudson seconds. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to invite the Deputy Warden, as I believe you're the chair of that committee. Can you explain what the, just put a little more flesh on the bones here as to what would happen going forward?
Well, years ago, a local forester, Tom Barry, with Western Woodlot Forest, not even with that, I guess, and I'm not even sure if it was with the consent of the county, but he went, or he was maybe requested by the county. I don't know. But years ago, he went out and cruised our Greywood lands, which is the former dump site, and found that a lot of the trees there in the spruce were getting in bad shape. They were mature and probably should be forested of sorts. And he wanted to, he had a plan for to put it into ecological forestry. they already paid, you know, he did the work. The Western Forest Woodlot Cooperative ended up paying him for his work. And they've got the work that he did back those years ago. So what they've proposed, from what I understand, and I'd have to go right to what they've proposed, is that they start with that piece of property, a certain piece of property, and they've identified 15 to 20 acres or hectares of it. And to start with that and put that into an ecologically modeled forest. There would be some harvesting, because obviously spruce, and especially after this last ice storm we've had, I don't know if any of you witnessed it, but I was up on a property that I have in Granville, and it was by the rifle range, and it was like the rifle range was in full operation during this ice storm with the trees snapping off. They were mostly spruce trees. This piece of property that they've identified is very heavily spruced. It was mature years ago. I'm sure that after this ice storm, it's a mess. But anyway, they've offered to go in it and look at it, find a forester contractor that would be willing to take it on. They have contacted, well, actually Harold Alexander, who was a well-known forester in Southwest Nova Scotia, we're actually right across the Maritimes, has sort of got it that he would take it on and make sure that it was done properly. And Warden, I'll leave it at that. You know, they've offered to do a percentage of this work at no charge, which is good. I think it's a win-win for the county. I think there's going to be eventually, once we look at our county properties, there's going to be we can get into this. There will be a pot of money that will be able to be carried on to look at other pieces of our county forested lands and get those in good shape. They would like to do this out there because of the location with it, and they want to showcase this piece of property that they go in and start cutting. This is a win-win for Annapolis County, folks. If we can get them to do this and show this, we've got excellent press coming our way. Now, with this, there would also be, in the end, which is going to go on to another motion here, you know, in the end, if they look after our forests, there will be some return of finances to us. I don't know the logistics of how municipalities are able to accumulate money. That's Mr. Dick's job. If there will be monies left over, I don't know what to do with these monies. I can only assume that perhaps we would put those in a special fund that can carry on to look after other pieces of county property. And with that, I'll leave it back. I'll give it back to you, Mr. Warden. Thank you.
Councillor Longmire?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the question. I'm not sure where, like when I read this motion, that municipal council request a proposal from the Western Woodlot Services. I'm just wondering, when did we begin that discussion, and had we, I guess I would say, shouldn't we be having this discussion at council first and then moving that through the committee? I'm just curious as to why the committee would reach out to the Western Woodlot Service Cooperative. I'm just awkwardly concerned there that the committee has done that and we haven't been part of. I'm just asking a question, I guess.
I would, thank you. Council many months ago voted that we would get, this was a motion of council. The committee is not working outside of its own authority. This was asked many months ago that we reach out to the Western Woodlot Forests Cooperative many months ago. As a matter of fact, I think it might have even been with the old council where it all started. But a few months ago, this council present council voted on reaching out to the Western Woodlot Forests Cooperative to see where we would go. Thank you.
Councillor Morrison, did I see your hand up?
Thank you. I'm very interested in this, and I just want to be sure that we haven't given any indication to this services cooperative that we are in favor of engaging them to carry out any work.
Okay, I think a lot of your question does relate to the wording of the motion, which I intended to bring up, but Deputy Warden, can you respond to that inquiry as to whether, is it your understanding that if we pass this motion, that the wheels in motion are started where we're actually hiring somebody to go in and start working on the land? No?
This is a simple motion. We're requesting a proposal from the Western Woodlot Services Cooperative. We already requested that months ago through motion of council. They've came back and they have said, listen, Tom Barry did this wonderful report on this property years before, and we would sort of reuse that, is what they've done. Western Woodlot Forest Cooperative has been promised nothing, nor all, and if we read this, I believe we're asking them to come forward, or perhaps I didn't get it worded that way, but we're asking the Western Woodlot Forests Cooperative to come and present to council on this piece of property, on what their plans would be. That's all we're doing. We're not promising anything to anybody.
Councillor Connell?
Yes, I agree with Deputy Warden Gunn, is that this has been in the process for many years. Forestry's always been one of the main components to Annapolis County. And again, previous councils, we've always stood the ground is that we should be leading by example. Why should we allow our forest to rot, fall down, people go in and harvest on their own? We don't do anything with our own properties that we own. And this is where this started on. We should have a piece of property in forestry management, especially if it can be a showcase. If we can show what we feel is a proper, appropriate forestry, hopefully we can encourage other forestry owners to follow suit. We have many chunks of forestry land that belongs to Annapolis County. We allowed the exhibition committee to go on some of our forestry. Some of the oxen and horse people went on and harvest logs at one point at our site on Ingesville, out on the Ingesville dump site, the old dump site. And they harvest logs and had them milled by portable millers. And they did a whole bunch of repairs to the exhibition grounds, which helped the community very well. So we definitely have forest lands that should be in some form of management. And I look at this as a good beginning and start, and especially if they want to come to a presentation and try to show us that what they're going to do or what they would like to be hired to do would be a showcase for our county. So I'm all for this.
I'll say my view. I think this is terrific. I really like this idea. I just want to clarify where we are in the process and the motion. The motion begins that we request a proposal from the Western Woodlot Services Corporation. I'm looking at the letter from Patricia Amaro to the deputy warden of January the 5th, where she says that she would prepare an operating plan. So I take it myself that when the motion reads a proposal, that's a reference to the operating plan that's referred to in the letter of January the 5th. And I think any confusion that I might have arises from the words to begin the process. And I would think that in a perfect world, and if this is what the motion is intended to do, then maybe we don't have to change it. But to my mind, it should read: a municipal council request an operating plan from Western Woodlot Services with respect to an ecological management process, rather than to begin. So as I see it, they've offered to provide an operating plan at no cost. I see it that they do that, it comes back, we look at it and we say, away you go. Rather than, if we agree with this, they're already moving the machinery. Have I got it right that they're gonna, this purpose of this motion is to come back with this operating plan before anybody does anything? Is that right? I see you're nodding, Deputy Warden. Okay. So hopefully that's clarified my only misunderstanding or confusion about it. So I'm happy to leave it the way it is if everybody's on the same page as to what we're doing. Yeah, Deputy Warden.
Should we make that slight change and do this? I mean, I have no problem making this change. I wrote this out, so sometimes I should take a little longer to think about things. But yes, to an operation plan.
Well, yeah, she refers to it as an operating plan instead of a proposal, and then it's the words "to begin." To clarify, just with respect to, so she's going to have a plan, and with respect to this property, come back to us. We're going to look at it and hopefully say, away you go.
That's it.
Councillor Hudson?
Yes, just one question. When you refer to operating plan, would you see that plan would give us information on the quantity and the value of wood that could be harvested there? There's an information element that may be there as well, right?
Deputy Warden, I see you nodding. Do you expect that to be in the operating plan?
I would expect that it's in the operating plan to know the volume, that they would have an idea of the volume of product, we'll call it that, coming out of there. And if there is a volume there, then you should be able to come up with an estimate. And that's all it would be, because we don't know the price of fuel. We don't know the price of logs at the moment. We don't know this, we don't know that. We don't, there's a lot of variables there that we won't know, but certainly should be able to come up with an estimate as to how many thousand, which is what are cubic meters or tons of fiber that'll come out of there. Because in essence, in the end, it's just fiber, it's logs, right? It's the way the industry looks at it. But we should, yes, know, have an idea of what's going to come out of there.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor LeBlanc?
Thank you. So as I see this, the proposal is to request, are we changing it, an operating plan? And I presume that the committee is going to write down what they need from this operation plan in detail. Is that what I'm looking at here?
Deputy Warden can answer, but I can tell you, I've had, I call them cruises done on my woodlot in the past, and it sets out, the amount of wood you've got, and an operating plan would probably also indicate, the type of work they would do and the purpose of what they go in for. I'm assuming that's what the operating plan would do, And I just see the operating plan coming back to us, to the council, not, go through the committee, but come back to council. Does that answer your question, Councilor LeBlanc?
Well, yes and no. Are we changing the, yes, it does. But are we changing the motion is the other question.
It's not for me to move an amendment. If any councillor wants to move an amendment to clarify, feels it needs to be clarified, I'm happy to entertain it. Deputy Warden?
Thank you. Should we make an amendment to that municipal council request a proposed operating plan? Does that make sense? From the Western Woodlot Services Cooperative?
I think
to begin.
I think it's just to request an operating plan, because that's what the letter says she would provide at no cost.
Just request an operating plan. Good enough. Well, I would make that motion. And I don't know if I can make it. But I wish somebody would.
So your amendment is to stop after Western Woodlot Services Cooperative?
No,
the municipality.
I think it's just to change the word proposal to, or a proposal to an operating plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Bartow seconds. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
I do.
Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
Sorry. I thought that you were going for an operation plan instead of a proposal. And then after cooperative, I thought you were going with respect to an ecological management process, not to begin. But
that's what I had suggested, but I'm not making the motion. The deputy warden suggested that. So
I was actually wondering about that, how that not to begin, it'd be best, how to put that, it would be best in respect to a ecological management process.
So
does that make sense to folks?
So I may not be completely correct, but I'm going to take the amendment to be a double amendment, an operating, it'll be to request an operating plan from Western Woodlot Services Corporation with respect to an ecological management process. Is that your amendment, Councillor Gunn?
Yes.
Or Deputy Warden Gunn?
Yeah.
And Councillor, who seconded that? Councillor Bartow, is that okay with you? Yeah. So on the amendment, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. So we're now back to the motion as amended, which simply says we're going to request an operating plan and it'll come back to us. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. So we're now on to 7.6.
Is this appropriate yet?
What do you mean?
Well, to designate funds for future ecological forestry development.
I don't know the answer to your question. That's for council to decide, I think.
Okay, then I'll read it out.
But just a sec, I see Councillor Morrison may wish to make a point before you begin. I'm not sure.
No, I'll wait for the reading. Thank you.
Okay.
7.6, designate funds for future ecological forestry development. The municipal council invest any funds realized from the proposed management on the Greywood site in a special forestry account for future ecological forestry development within the county pursuant to the recommendation of the Forest Advisory Committee.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hudson seconds. Discussion? Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. I thank Councillor Gunn for his foresight in asking the question he did before he read the motion. The situation now is we are asking a cooperative to present us with a proposed plan, which we may or may not accept, which we may or may not amend. And then I think after we make a decision, if the decision is a positive one, then we can turn our attention to the subject of this motion. But in truth, I think it's a bit premature.
Would you like to move to table the motion, Councillor Morrison?
All right. Thank you.
Is there a second? I don't know. Can you second the motion to table your own motion? I'll take that as a second anyway. So I don't know if a motion to table is debatable. Madam
No.
Clerk, can you help me out? It's
No.
not debatable. So I'm going to call, there's a motion to table this motion about designating any funds. That's the motion to table that. All those in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Next is the notice of motion 8.1 strategic planning. Now, before we get into this, I have a little comment to make about the process. The CAO and I had a discussion about where this should be on the agenda. Councillor Longmire sent us a note saying she would like to have a discussion on strategic planning. And that was basically it. And, you know, we could figure out that she probably wanted to talk about what we're going to do on it. New business usually comes from staff, and it can result in a motion at council. If a councillor wishes to bring up an issue for council to vote on, they should give notice of motion so that staff can review what the proposal might be, come back to the next meeting informed, councillors can think about it, and all that sort of thing. So usually, again, if there's when a new business comes up, there's a report from staff with background and all that sort of thing. And in this particular case, there was no report from Councillor Longmire, just the indication that she wanted to discuss strategic planning. So, as I said, Mr. Dick and I had a discussion, and we landed on notice of motion, so that if any discussion doesn't go the way Councillor Longmire wants it to go, she's fully authorized to bring forward a motion to move it the way she wants next month. But having said all that, I think really what she wanted to do was see where we are on strategic planning. And technically, on notice of motion, you shouldn't have any discussion on the notice of motion. So you can see where Mr. Dick and I passed it around. And so I'm going to kind of suggest that we kind of break the rules a little bit here. And I'm going to ask Councillor Longmire to provide us with some understanding of what she wanted to do with strategic planning, and maybe we'll go from there, if that's all right with council. So I don't see any disagreement around the table. So Councillor Longmire, can you tell us what you had in mind with respect to strategic planning?
Sure, thank you, Warden. It merely was just looking towards our future, and having had the presentation by the accessibility group, I was just interested in seeing, you know, where we might be in beginning the planning or the discussions and what that might look like. I would not like to see another year go by without looking at something. And I know that in 2016, there was a strategic plan that had been presented, and just, you know, it'd be interesting to look at that and then perhaps bring this back at a later date and start wherever we may. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Dick, I was going to turn to you and look for your assistance in I think this is an issue that all of council would like to see some movement on. I'm not sure whether it should come through a committee or from staff, so please help us out what you think.
Thank you for bringing this up, Councillor. It's already in our budget for the next year. We've already put some money aside, and we will be debating that at our budget sessions. But councillor staff recognizes the importance of having one as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Dick, can you help me out as to how, like, would we have an ad hoc committee, or would staff basically drive it? Can you tell me today? Maybe you can't, as to how this process would go forward.
Yes, Mr. Warden. So should council agree to put money aside in the budget for a strategic plan, staff would put an RFP together and get respondents and make a decision on who the proponent would be. And then the process, I suspect the process would be, is that we'd all be given homework based on whoever the successful proponent is. And the proponent would meet with council, with staff, and with the community and determine what the strategic goals and initiatives should be for the next 5-year period. So these things typically, I've been involved in a number of them. They typically take, between 4 and 6 months to do. We could do it quicker, but I guess it all depends on the timing. And given the fact that we probably wouldn't even approve one of these things until, mid-May or even early June, I suspect that the goal would be to have it done in the fall. But more importantly is once we've identified what those initiatives should be, we have to continue to move on those. We have to make those part of our everyday life. So my suspicion is that I would direct somebody internally to be our strategic initiatives person, and they will be bringing back reports on a regular basis to council to see where we are in terms of what those initiatives are. And every report, ideally every report written going forward after the approval of that plan, would make some reference to the strategic plan. So this is something that we deal with on a daily basis, and certainly we keep bringing this forward to council. And the other thing is that these are living documents that we may make a decision, come fall on certain things, but those things are subject to change based on, where we are in terms of accessibility or budget opportunities for us. So those things do change, but certainly that's the process that I would envision happening going forward.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dick. Any other comments, Deputy Warden?
Thank you. Years ago, when I first came on council, I heard about the importance of the strategic plan and one thing and another. And I heard somebody get up one time and his qualification was that he had worked on the strategic plan. And so I kind of went to the strategic plan, and what I found on our county website is a list that's like long. And I looked at it and I said, oh my God. I said, well, some of these are great ideas. And, but there's just so many. So my question would be, is when we redevelop our strategic plan, will we come down to maybe 5 or 6 that are very important to us, and the rest will just sort of stay down? Will there be those? Will we focus on the ones that come to the top, raise to the top? Just a question, folks.
If I may, Mr. Warden.
Yes.
That's really dependent on what the plan says, but that's typically how it works. You identify them in the number of categories, and that would be economic development, human resources, climate control and things like that. And there are some that are easily attainable, and there's some that are longer term. So Deputy Warden, you're exactly right. We have way too many, 62 items, really. I think that's what the number is. I think, to try to identify, to try to achieve 62 items in a time frame doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't mean that you don't put a number of items on the list, because as you meet one goal, you can strive to hit others. But that's generally what it would be. And I would think that at the end of the day, if you have, 5 main categories and they each have 3 or 4 items on it, that's probably all one can do in a regular term of council.
Thank you for that. Councillor Longmire, does that satisfy your inquiry, so we don't need to put your motion on for the next committee of the whole meeting in March?
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I see it's 12 o'clock. The next item on the agenda is to go in camera. I'm not exactly sure what's there. There's no legal matters on there. I think probably, unless council feels differently, we will break for lunch.
Mr.
And-
Warden?
Yeah.
We can probably get, there's 4 or 5 items. Some of them are minutes in length. Some of them might be a little bit longer, but I think we can probably have it all done by 1 o'clock.
Well, that would be fine with me since I'm driving into Halifax this afternoon, but I'll look around. Would you kind of nod if you're in agreement if I look around the table? Okay, thank you, Mr. Dick. I think we'll do that. And so I'll entertain a motion to go in camera with respect to section 22(2)E contract negotiations and as well as personnel.
So moved.
As well as personnel?
Yeah, as well as personnel, right, Mr. Dick?
Yes.
Yeah. It's moved by the deputy warden to go in camera for those 2 items. Is there a second? Councillor Redden seconds. Any discussion about going in camera on those items? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. All set? Okay. Thank you. Unless there's something else that somebody would like to bring up for the committee of the whole meeting today, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Sheridan, seconded by Councillor Connell. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's carried.